Beneath the modern streets of Seattle lies a hidden world. An entire forgotten neighborhood slumbers quietly in the cold, dark shadows of the busy city right above it. Thousands of footsteps echo off concrete sidewalks every single day. People walk completely unaware that they are treading directly upon the abandoned roofs of the old distant past. How does an entire bustling district vanish below ground level? The answer requires a dark journey backward into the muddy and tumultuous early history of the 19th century. In its earliest days, this frontier town was built directly upon unstable tidal flats. The streets flooded constantly, turning daily life into an endless battle against wet mud. Horses sank deep into the treacherous muck during high tide. Citizens routinely lost their boots while simply attempting to cross the dreadful roads to reach local timber mills. Wooden buildings balanced precariously upon fragile stilts above the sinking earth. Indoor plumbing became a nightmare, with raw sewage frequently pushing backward into homes during heavy seasonal rain. People tolerated these miserable conditions because the booming timber trade provided immense wealth. They ignored the terrifying vulnerability of their rapidly growing settlement until disaster eventually struck hard. The turning point arrived on a dry afternoon in the summer of 1889. A simple accident involving spilled hot glue ignited a catastrophic chain of events. Flames rapidly devoured the wooden carpenter shop and quickly spread outward. Volunteer firefighters rushed toward the expanding blaze, but discovered their water pressure was completely inadequate for survival. Wooden pipes feeding the hydrants were hollowed out tree trunks. When desperately needed, these primitive water lines caught fire themselves, utterly dooming the entire downtown district to ashes. The Great Inferno raged throughout the long, terrifying night. When morning finally broke across the smoky horizon, 33 massive city blocks had been completely reduced to cinders. Miraculously, historical records indicate that nobody perished in the actual flames. However, the physical infrastructure of the wealthy and thriving pioneer community was thoroughly destroyed without a trace. Instead of showing despair, the ambitious city leaders viewed this absolute devastation as a brilliant opportunity. They could finally fix the endless flooding problem plaguing their lower streets. Their bold solution was incredibly radical for the era. They decided to rebuild everything out of solid brick and raise the actual street level up to 20 feet. Property owners immediately began constructing their new masonry buildings at the original ground elevation. They could not afford to wait while the complex municipal grading project slowly finished. This chaotic timeline created an utterly bizarre urban landscape. New brick walls rose from the scorched earth, while the government constructed massive concrete retaining walls in the streets. Soil was heavily pumped inside those massive retaining walls. The brand new raised streets were now sitting much higher than the front doors of the newly completed businesses. For several bizarre years, pedestrians walked strictly on the old level. They navigated strange, deep trenches alongside the towering new roadways hovering dangerously high above their innocent heads. Crossing the street meant climbing a steep wooden ladder, scurrying across the raised dirt road, and then descending another rickety ladder just to reach a shop across town. Drunken men frequently fell off the high elevated streets into the deep gaps below. Several tragic deaths forced the city council to finally implement a permanent safety solution. Iron arches and thick steel beams were tightly placed between the new high streets and the second stories of the buildings. These heavy structures created an artificial ceiling. Thick brick arches supported smooth new concrete sidewalks above. The old original sidewalks were instantly transformed into dark underground tunnels completely forever sealed off from the natural sunlight. The bottom floors of these Victorian structures became basements. Shop owners merely moved their front doors to the second floor, allowing regular business to continue on the surface. Small glass skylights containing special purple prisms were securely embedded into the new concrete sidewalks. These thick glass panels allowed dim natural light to filter down below ground. During those early transitional years, merchants successfully operated two separate storefronts simultaneously. Customers could shop brightly up above or wander into the shadowy subterranean realms hidden deeply beneath. Slowly, the lower levels lost their original commercial appeal. The constant dampness ruined inventory, and the persistent smell of stale air drove respectable customers toward the upper sunshine. The legitimate businesses eventually abandoned the lower underground sections completely. However, an empty dark space in a booming gold rush town does not remain empty for very long. By the early 1900s, these damp underground corridors had become a notorious haven for illicit activities. A sprawling invisible criminal empire flourished silently away from police patrols. Opium dens filled the stagnant air with heavily sweet, intoxicating smoke. Secret illegal gambling parlors operated right under the unsuspecting boots of the lawful citizens walking just above. Bootleggers securely stored their forbidden whiskey barrels in these forgotten brick vaults. Secret passages allowed smugglers to move their precious cargo without ever exposing themselves to open sunlight. Homeless populations sought desperate shelter from the freezing winter rains. They built fragile encampments within the dusty abandoned storefronts, living like forgotten ghosts in a buried dark tomb. Bubonic plague struck the city in 1907. Terrified health officials quickly realized the filthy underground tunnels were swarming with thousands of aggressively dangerous infected black rats. The local government panicked and officially condemned the entire subterranean network. Heavy iron grates were slammed shut and securely locked, sealing off the sprawling hidden catacombs from humanity. For nearly 50 quiet years, the buried city rested in complete pitch darkness. Debris piled up against the cracked glass skylights, hiding the lost world from modern memory. Spiderwebs thickly coated the antique wooden doors and vintage banking teller cages. Rust slowly consumed the iron support columns, holding up the crushing weight of modern progress. Generations of residents lived out their busy lives without ever suspecting anything. The chaotic history beneath their shiny modern avenues slowly transformed into vague and easily dismissed rumors. A local historian named Bill Spidell eventually grew intensely curious about these persistent urban legends. He boldly organized a small exploration expedition during 1954 to investigate. Armed with heavy flashlights and thick boots, his small team pried open an ancient rusting grate. They stepped carefully downward into the cold and intensely eerie stagnant darkness. Sweeping beams of bright light pierced the profound gloom for the very first time in decades. The amazed explorers discovered a perfect architectural time capsule, frozen securely underground. Fully intact staircases desperately led upward into solid concrete ceilings above them. Ornate plaster moldings still decorated the crumbling walls of grand hotels swallowed by the endless earth. The fascinating discovery captured the vivid public imagination almost instantly. People eagerly demanded access to witness this bizarre buried neighborhood hidden underneath their very own daily commuter paths. A small portion of the vast, sprawling labyrinth was finally cleared of dangerous debris. Guided tours began shortly after, inviting curious citizens into the gloomy and forgotten depths. Descending those steps feels exactly like traveling through a magical portal backward through time. The overwhelming smell of dry dirt and ancient damp wood dominates the heavy atmosphere. Faint rumbles from massive buses rolling on the modern streets constantly shake the old brick foundations above. The noise creates a ghostly echo bouncing deeply along the corridors. If you look upward, you can still observe the purple glass prisms embedded tightly in the thick concrete ceiling. They glow faintly whenever harsh sunlight hits the pavement. Today, structural engineers must constantly monitor these aging historic underground support structures. Preserving the crumbling masonry requires endless maintenance to prevent catastrophic sudden collapses of the busy roads. Most of the original vast network remains entirely sealed off from the general public. Countless dark miles of forbidden subterranean streets stretch completely unexplored beneath the modern metropolis. Urban explorers still secretly dream of finding untouched pockets of history buried completely intact. Rumors persist about wealthy underground bank vaults filled heavily with abandoned antique gold coins. Paranormal investigators frequently visit these damp, empty corridors, searching deeply for supernatural phenomenon. They loudly claim to hear distinct phantom footsteps echoing quietly across the ancient dusty floorboards. Whether haunted by actual spirits or merely lingering memories, the underground exerts immense power. It constantly reminds citizens that civilizations are truly built upon the ruins of others. Every magnificent skyscraper requires a solid foundation deeply anchored within the dark earth below. Seattle just happens to firmly rest upon the literal roofs of its distant ancestors. The strange story proves that aggressive human resilience often creates very bizarre permanent solutions. A devastating destructive fire ultimately birthed a wildly unique and fascinating dual-level reality. Next time you boldly stroll along those historic cobblestone squares, sipping expensive hot coffee, pause briefly and contemplate the hidden massive darkness directly existing underneath your trendy footwear. You might unknowingly be standing perfectly above an old forgotten Victorian gambling parlor room. Perhaps you are currently positioned above a rusty antique vault, empty and utterly silent. This quiet underground realm acts like an anchor tying modern life to early struggles. The buried brick architecture bravely stands defiant against the relentless, aggressive passage of time. Shadows patiently wait for scattered bits of daylight filtering through the scratched purple glass. Dust motes slowly dance endlessly inside the quiet, abandoned hollows of the subterranean world. Countless buried secrets probably remain entirely undiscovered within those dark, flooded lower basement corridors. Perhaps future generations will bravely unearth whatever else still actively hides deeply down there. The forgotten sunken city effectively serves as an ultimate physical metaphor for history itself. The brilliant, bright present completely relies upon a dark, unseen foundation buried far beneath. Next time you deeply feel the subtle rhythmic vibrations beneath the cold concrete pavement, acknowledge the grand lost souls who originally built the true invisible heart of Seattle. Their magnificent sunken legacy stubbornly survives inside the damp darkness, forever resisting absolute erasure. The subterranean realm waits silently, watching everyone walking quickly over the forgotten silent graves.